Cool.
All right. Yeah, let me get your attention. Quiet. Okay. Thank you. All right. I want to hear about two of these. So let's get a volunteer who can tell me about their arguments. Yeah. Well, you have one of those, huh? Okay. I'll go for tacos. Okay, so tell me. But, okay, how did this argument start?
Well, my dad wanted to eat sandwiches for dinner, and my sister wanted to have hot dogs, and I said it doesn't matter because they're the same thing. And then my family was like, they're not because hot dogs are.
Okay, good. So, what kind of evidence, like if everybody's having this argument, how did you try to win this argument? Were you just like, well, that's what I think? Or how did you try to like convince them?
I think sandwich, for my definition, it just has to be 2 pieces of bread and something in there, or 2 objects of anything that are the same thing in between. Like, for example, it's a sandwich. If like Parker sat between me and Elle, it's a girl sandwich because.
Wait, is it a girl sandwich or is it a Parker sandwich?
So that's what Parker sandwich, because you don't say, oh, I'm eating a bread sandwich. Or like
Yeah,
a
the
supper.
Parker sandwich.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a
Oh my God.
There's 3 sides.
Okay, quiet. Yeah.
But aren't hot dogs tacos because the bread's connected?
No, but if you have a deli sandwich, the bread is connected, but it's still a sandwich. Unless you slice it.
All right, I want to keep having this conversation, but I need to go through it. And apparently, a very controversial issue. Yeah, Maxwell.
From my past experience debating on hot dogs being a sandwich, I usually go to dictionary definitions and try to look up unbiased things. Show that hot dogs are not sandwiches.
Just say your mom's a
You
sandwich.
ever
Okay.
put long sticks on sandwiches?
Quiet. Okay, so quiet. All right, so what I'm hearing is you start with, this is a definitional play by nature, right? You are trying to decide, we're going way back to the beginning here, but you are trying to decide what the definition is of a sandwich and if a hot dog fits into the category of those definitions, right? So in order to make your definitional claim, you had to start with the definition categories, right? You're like, here are the things that qualify something as a sandwich, and then you made your matched argument. And you tried to make that with an analogy in here. Maybe it didn't work quite right, but that's how you were going. That was sort of your go-to, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Impetus, I guess, to like make an analogy to prove your argument, right? That's a go-to strategy that you were using. And then you have other people who start to talk about counter arguments. So you start talking about this taco issue, and if it's connected, then doesn't that make it some other sort of category? And if you were to be effective there, you're going to have to meet those counter arguments. You're going to have to anticipate those counter arguments and kind of address them before they come up if you're actually writing this thing, right? Do you think that this is a real argumentative topic?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, why? Why does this, how does this make it like a good argumentative topic? Like what makes it a good argument?
Because you can argue both sides.
Okay, so there's something, there's some sort of like both sides idea. Basically what we're saying here is it is not objective fact.
You just gonna argue all day long today?
If we,
No.
quiet. Okay, if you were trying to make an argument about objective fact, like you were like, oh, this ballpark beef hot dog is made of beef parts. That's just an objective fact, right? You're not going to have a very good argument. there, right? You can't base an argument on something that everyone just agrees on as truth. What's become very difficult in 2022 now is that there are very few things that people seem to agree on as objective truth. So this kind of opens up an arena for arguments, I guess. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, but that's the case. But you want to make sure that there is actually somebody that disagrees with your argument, or you don't have a good argument. All right, tell me about one other argument you had over the break.
Well, mine was subjective facts, so.
Taya?
What time the poll started?
What time the Rose Bowl started, and this created an argument?
Yeah.
Quiet.
That was
It
the.
very small.
So how did the argument go then?
It was, my dad thinking it started at 1:30 Eastern time,
Uh-huh.
and then I was like, no.
So how did that argument get solved?
Ayo was right.
At 2:30, he was like, oh, we should start watching the Rose Bowl. I was like, but it's halfway through, because I agreed with him later. And I realized that I asked Alexa. And it was at 3, and I was right. And
Okay.
He's like, turns out you're right.
Okay.
That's the biggest BS game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Literally.
This is a really good example of something that would not necessarily make a great argument, right? You might have people that are disagreeing about the objective truth of a fact, but that doesn't necessarily make it objectively, it doesn't necessarily make it subjective, right? And I will get arguments that look like this sometimes, where people will try to create an argument where it can be very easily solved. So without any subjectivity, it's going to be really hard to make that point. Did anybody have an argument that they felt was like too subjective? Like, for example, I had an argument, not this break, but maybe a couple months ago, about whether or not tattoos can be attractive. So with my mom, she said,
It's something with no end. Like,
Yeah.
it's not opinion, it's intent.
exactly. So my mom was like, my mom said, no, tattoos can never be attractive. If you have a tattoo, you are making yourself more unattractive, right? Whereas I am saying, oh, I like tattoos, like a full sleeve tattoo, that's very attractive to me, or whatever. And we had this back and forth, and ultimately we start talking about like our subjective opinions on attractiveness or whatever. We're both trying to make it an objective argument, but it is not working at all because it's just completely based on opinion. There are certain things that are based on opinion that you really, if you tried to set up the categories of what is attractive or what is not, you're gonna have a really hard time arguing that. Or what smells good and what doesn't, what tastes good and what doesn't. That's gonna be a very difficult argument to make. Yeah, no.
Well, there's one kid at my work that told me that he thinks that Mega Blocks are better than Lego, but that's like, that's just wrong. Cause like, just
Good one.
I just remember when I actually had a Mega Block set, because my mom got me one on accident. And we found out that it sucked. And this kid was trying to convince me that it was better than the largest toy company in the world. And I was like, you're wrong. He was like, well, they have so many, like, they pay so much more attention to their brand, because the whole time that for 3 years Lego had Ninja Turtles, they only made 3 sets, and Mega Bloks did 15 the first month. I was like, what are we arguing? Like,
Okay,
I sell
wait.
tires than Costco. Like,
Okay, let
that's
me-
just a fact.
Let me hear the different categories then. So he was saying because it's more, there's more of it.
But there's not. But there's not.
There's
No, he thinks they go more in depth with the brands they have, which is
Okay.
like
No, that's
Halo
not
and.
Lego literally
you see-
And what would be
More
your
intricate.
response to that?
Lego pieces, he literally admitted that the Mega Bloks pieces are worse. He was like, they used to be inconsistent, I know. And I was like, Lego has never been inconsistent. Every piece is exactly the same. They all fit together. If they're not, you can get like a bunch. You can get, yeah, you can get, and you get a new Lego set. They give you the bad pieces.
Yeah, they'll literally send you new ones.
Okay.
Like, if you're missing a piece, you just send them over, you're like, I don't have.
Enough Lego blocks are made every year to go to the moon and back.
You guys are
Every
literally
year.
arguing with someone who is not here.
All right, quiet.
It was very heated. It was very heated. This kid was like, I'm not saying Lego is bad, but Mega Bloks is better. And I was like,
Okay, so let's think about where the disagreement happened in this. So this is an evaluation claim. right? You're arguing over what's the best. And if you're comparing two things, you're still arguing over which is the better product, right? And what the problem is, it sounds like here, is that you guys actually agree on what each product has, maybe not you. He agreed that Lego might have these things, but then he made this argument that actually a category that we're not considering is what makes the blocks the best or whatever, and it's that their brand is in depth. I don't know what that means.
Me either.
But do you see how-
Change their name because they really suck.
Do you see how you're disagreeing about the categories that you're setting up? It's an opinion-based problem, right? Maybe this kid, right? Maybe this kid played with Mega Bloks as a kid and he has some nostalgic attachment to Mega Bloks. And so he has this opinion then that Mega Bloks are the better, superior product, right? And maybe you played with Legos as a kid, and so you've got this opinion that Legos are the superior product. And I always get kids in this class saying, I can't argue about that. It's opinion-based. Like, I can't argue that Jurassic Park is the best movie ever made because that's just an opinion. All arguments are opinions, right? Every one of them. If you can prove it just based on asking Alexa what time the thing starts, then it's not an argument. It might be a fight, but it's not an argument. An argument is where you've got sort of backed up opinions and you're willing to listen to the other side. So we've got two categories we got to consider here.
He literally was like, they had to change their name because they were like so bad. Like he admitted that, and I was like, you can't say they're good. He's like, but they are.
Okay. All right, so two different things we need to consider when we're thinking about whether or not this is an argument you can actually write about. One, is it a pseudo argument or is it an actual argument? A pseudo argument would be arguments that are just far too subjective. And there are very few things that I would argue are too subjective to argue about. You can mostly find objective ways to argue about everything. Like you can find reasonable ways to argue about most things. In terms of personal taste though, like things that are just like very, very emotional, it becomes more difficult. So you might call that a pseudo argument. The tattoo argument with my mom was not a real argument. It was a pseudo argument. I can't convince my mom to be attracted to tattoos. That's crazy. The other thing we want to look out for is the argument versus fight. And this is kind of the way that you're approaching it. So if you approach something with this idea, Legos are 100% objectively better, I will listen to no arguments that say otherwise,
Yes. Yep.
then you are approaching it as a fight, not an argument. Right? Maybe it's not a serious fight, maybe it won't come to blows. But if you go into the discussion thinking, I am 100% right, and my only purpose in this discussion is to prove that the other person is wrong, then you don't have a full argument, right? So what characterizes an argument then is kind of like an attitude of openness. When you're having an argument, you're not having a debate. When you write an argument paper, it is not a debate. It is not, here are all my points. I am right, you are wrong. You need to agree with me completely. An argument is more of a reasoning. So you're thinking about the issue. You're thinking about what could possibly be true here and what could I acknowledge is true about the other person's side. So go back to hot dog versus sandwich. Part of what makes that debate kind of fun to have is that there might not be a super clear definition of exactly what a sandwich is. And so everybody kind of comes into the discussion with a different idea of what they think a sandwich is, right? And if you want to be effective, if you want to actually have a really good argument, you have to acknowledge that gray area. You can't go into it saying like, I know what a sandwich is and you are wrong. You have to go into it saying like, well, what do you think a sandwich is? Okay, building on that definition, here's what I think it is. Let's come to some sort of understanding. So the goal of the argument, we're talking about this in terms of writing. The goal is to fully acknowledge the other person's point of view and to build off that other person's point of view, your audience's point of view, so that you can get to a mutual agreement. Yeah.
Possible to have both in the same thing.
What do you mean?
So you have two people. Going back to the sandwich, there's one person who says, nope, hot dog is a sandwich. This is. Persuade me otherwise, like I know for a fact. So they're fighting, but the other person's like, I'm willing to listen to your side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I would say the person having the fight though is not going to write a good paper. And the person that feels like they're having an argument, they're gonna write a good paper.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I would disagree with that because I watched a TED talk on how to be a better arguer.
Uh-huh.
And he says by listening and not always like, don't always put yourself right, listen to the other side and let yourself be wrong, because then you can see like the other side. And in that sense, like you both walk away, you're not upset because you let them win, and they're not upset because they won. And so like I watched the whole TED talk about how losing an argument makes you better at arguing.
Actually, that's what I'm saying too. Yeah,
Oh, wait,
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the person who goes into it and is like, I must win this and I'm having a fight and I'm gonna write this paper, and by the end, I'm like, yep, I was completely right. They're not writing a very good paper usually. Usually they haven't been able to like fully understand how a different point of view might fit into their own. Yeah.
So then that like raises the question, like, what is an argument? Because if it's not you, like, is an argument you winning the scenario, or is it simply just like opposing views? Is that an argument? Or is it,
Yes.
Like it's winning
It's
the
you.
fight?
So yeah, so an argument, a good argument essay is going to be you presenting opposing views in light of somebody else's views, right?
Okay.
So let's say somebody is completely, I don't know, anti-immigration. Let's close the borders forever, don't let anybody in, right? They're coming into it as a kind of fight. They're like, there's no use for immigration. It's, I don't know if anybody who believes this, but
No use in immigration.
there's no use for immigration. We're just gonna stay the way that we are now, you know? They're coming into it with this very like black and white attitude. If you wanna win that argument, or you wanna write a good paper about that argument, you can't come into it saying, let's open all the borders, 100% of immigration is good, right? And instead, you've got to acknowledge what they're saying. You have to say, yes, there are some parts of immigration that could be improved upon. There are some parts of immigration that are troubling in the system we have now, et cetera. But here is why I think the answer is actually to, you know, open the borders further or whatever, so that you're like meeting them a little bit, and that way you're going to potentially win that argument. When we say win, it maybe is like, maybe the point of it is just to like persuade someone to think about the other side. I feel like the world that we're living in, you are not going to persuade people of opinions that they don't already have very easily, right? But you are trying to persuade them to think about it in a new way. And that's kind of your goal of it. Okay, does that make sense? Did that answer your question, Abby?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So with that in mind, we are starting a unit on the American dream. There's a senior in here, but you didn't take, yeah, you took my class. Okay, so if you're a senior, you know, you had an American Dream unit in 11th grade too. For most of us, we're 11th graders, and so this is like when you're doing this for the first time. We are reading Gatsby, The Great Gatsby, which if you're a senior, you might have read before. That's okay, I read it every year, so you can read it again. It's a great American classic, right? So we're going to shape our argument unit around this idea of the American dream and this idea of whether or not that American dream is possible for everyone in America. So to start that out, I want you to talk with the person next to you. And I want you to figure out, actually take out piece of paper, you need paper.
This discussion we just had about subjective. Great Gatsby is a very classic. We can't just talk about it.
It is an American classic. No. Yeah, just scrap paper, you don't need to turn it in.
Great Gatsby is good if you like people like dominating and like hitting America. Bro,
Okay. All right. We're starting with the definition of play. So with your partner, with the person that you sit next two, I want you to come up with a definition of what the American dream is. This is a term that you've heard many times before. If you haven't, read a newspaper, it's in the newspaper. What do you think the American dream is to you? And I don't want you to look it up. I don't want other people's definition. I want you to say, like, after being an American for 16 years now, maybe actually I shouldn't assume that, not a lot of you, but most of you 16 years, maybe some of you very recently. After being an American for this long, what does the American dream mean? Okay, write it down with your partner. Come up with a definition.
I think it's just like the upper right.
And everyone is writing that down.
Once we get used to just having those.
Yeah.
Something like I start to appreciate compared to other people, like, who don't know those things.
So they have freedom and
Yeah, write down your definition.
Like you can retire with one money.
Okay, so everyone should have it written down now. Okay, and then I want you to have a discussion about these three things and write down your notes on this piece of paper. One, is the American dream static or dynamic? Meaning, has it stayed the same since America's inception, or has it changed over the years, and how has it changed? Two, is it possible? Do you think it's possible for everyone, or do you think it's only possible for certain people? And number three, is it an admirable ideal? So what I mean by that is this an ideal of American life that should be admired, that should be reached for, or should we change it? Okay, discuss those things for 4 minutes and write down your answers.
And then, like, is it possible?
Okay, if you're working from home, I gotta go to the front of the room for this part, so hopefully you can hear me through the microphone. And I will put up the
Oh, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I cut that short. I cut that short, but let's look at this, this definition. So this is the first time the phrase, the American dream appeared in print. It's actually not that old, you know, it's not from, you know, the 1700s. This is from 1930 something. I want to say 31. I can't remember exactly though. So it says, why did I write down two rows? Hey, I'll get you that. Anyway, it says, the American dream is that dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement. It is not a dream of motor cars and highways merely, but a dream of social order in which each man and each woman shall be able to attain to the fullest stature of which they are innately capable and be recognized by others for what they are, regardless of the fortuitous circumstances of birth or position. All right, what I want you to do now is I want you to compare this definition to your definition. What do you think is the same and what do you think is different?
Yeah. But we went further.
Yeah, I know. I saw it. Oh, yeah, it's like blackjack, so you're trying to get as close to zero.
Okay, let's talk about this as a class. So, let's talk about this as a class. Okay. So this is the definition we're going to work with. I think it's a pretty good definition. Sorry, Ellie wrote. Cut me out. I think it's a really good definition actually because it kind of stays so wide. It says better, richer, and fuller. All right, I understand what richer means, at least in terms of monetary value. But what does it mean to live a fuller life?
I think like living a fuller life is like you have more opportunities, like you get do more things that like makes you like feel fulfilled.
Okay, and that's what Ellie Rose said, the word fulfillment too. What does it mean to be fulfilled? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so it kind of satisfaction with life. Is that the same as like a contentment then?
Yeah.
Okay, so like a day-to-day, I feel good about the life I've lived. Let's see.
Like doing what makes you happy, not what you think you should Do what makes you happy and not what other people should.
Okay, so it's about living a life that is not completely dictated by obligations. That whether that obligation is social, like I have to fit into a certain stratum of society, whether that obligation is financial, like I have to fill all of my time with working so that I can survive, whatever that expectation is. The American dream supposedly says you should be able to like live a life outside of those expectations and be happy about it, fulfilled. Yeah, myself.
I think it's differentiating like living life rich. So like that would be a full life from like the world's perspective, but like this is saying you can live your life how you want to, and it's not how everybody expects a full life to look like.
Yeah, okay, so it's not dictated for you by somebody else about exactly what fulfillment looks like for you. Okay.
It's talking about capability and like you're talking about that like, different people rise to occasions or like they come up, like not everybody graduates high school, like if you graduate, not everybody goes into the same job and like you can, or like you can have that like equal opportunity to get somewhere, but you just might not see that.
Okay, good. So if we combine better, richer, and fuller then, and sticking to that, when we think about fuller, we were talking about this idea of fulfillment. And you're saying like for some people that might be richer, like in terms of actual money, right? For other people, it might be something else. But either way, it's going to be better. Like it's like you can, as you sort of work through your life, you're making your life better, richer, and fuller, right? And he's saying all of those things are fine. Yeah.
But then like that's where the counter argument comes in because we don't really know what better is. Like, because if your life's already good, no matter what, you're never gonna have.
Yeah.
You always want more. And so I think that's like why the American dream is kind of funny because everybody's on different playing field that will start out. Even though it says regardless, like, in reality, everyone starts out in different places. And nobody really knows what like, the best.
Okay, good. So maybe this idea of fulfillment is kind of a double-edged sword. It's like, yes, that sounds like really amazing, but can anyone ever be fulfilled if they are also reaching for something better and richer? Will they ever feel that sense of fulfillment, or is it always like a striving to be better? Like, it's not best, it's better than you were, 3 minutes ago. So how do you maintain that? Yeah, I do think that's something about whether or not it's admirable and feel, right? Okay, look at this part, each according to ability or achievement, and then a little bit later, which they are innately capable. What does that add to our understanding of it? Yeah.
Kind of like the abilities that you have. So like someone who's taller, like has more like not more, but like different kinds of opportunities. Or like someone that is, I don't know, like football players have different kinds of opportunities than like Steve Jobs. Like
Okay, good.
there's just because of what you were born to, like just your physical ability and your mental ability changes. So that's like the unique capable of what person that you have.
Okay, good. So it's not like this, it's not presenting this fantasy where anyone could be a professional basketball player, right? It is acknowledging that there are innate differences between people and that because of those innate differences, they'll have different options. Yeah, Maxwell.
That's where my definition fits it the most. In my definition, it kind of seemed like you can grow the capability to do all these things through hard work. But in this one, it just says like some talents will like help you to achieve different things.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
Yeah, good. What this definition is saying, though, is that just because you have a certain innate quality does not mean that your life should be better, richer, and fuller than somebody else's, right? It's according to your own innate quality. So if I'm 6'7" and somebody else is 5'7", and I get to play professional basketball, that doesn't mean that my life should be better, richer, and fuller than the short person who is a welder. Right? 5'7". I mean, it's like you're beyond, beyond short. Anyway, so the idea here then is that you can be recognized for what you are, regardless of your gratuitous circumstances of birth or condition, recognized for your own humanity, and that your life gets to be better, richer, and fuller in America, right? I think we all have different ideas about how achievable this is and how achievable it might be for every single person in America. I think like probably the past 5 years have really woken us up to this idea even more as we are sort of like confronted with different realities that we maybe didn't want to face in the past. But this is the ideal that I think accurately stated the country really looks to for its myth-making, like looks to for making its choices about who they are as a country. The country looks to this definition and says, what can we do to better our policies or better our understanding of each other to like reach towards this goal, right? So whether or not you think it's already possible or whether or not you think it should be possible in the future, maybe depends on your own experience. We're going to kind of structure our unit around this quotation and thinking about the realities of this quotation. And we're going to be thinking about those 3 questions. Is it admirable? Is it possible? Has it changed through the years? And to do that, let's start a very short lesson on thesis statements, and then we're going to look at so, argumentative thesis statements. We're going to use a structure called an enthymeme. Write down that word, enthymeme.
Just on our papers?
Yeah. Okay, an enthymeme is a logical structure that includes a claim plus a reason. That's the thesis structure we're going to use. A claim is an argumentative assertion. An assertion that you will be able to argue and ultimately try to prove is true. So this is not an objective fact, like the Rose Bowl example was a great example for this. It's not an objective fact that you could just Google and find out if it's true. It is some sort of argument that there could be multiple opinions on, and you are stating what your opinion is. The claim is your opinion. A reason is the rationale for why your claim is true. All right, we've talked a lot in this, well, maybe just a little bit in this class so far about the 5-paragraph essay structure that you might be used to. You might be used to intro, thesis, 3 reasons, reason 1, reason 2, reason 3, conclusion, equals restate your thesis. And there you go, there's your argument. Some teachers might have taught you reason 1, reason 2, reason 3, counter argument, conclusion, right? This is a great starting structure. We're going to move on from this though, because we've talked a lot about how this includes things that won't necessarily be included in the rhetorical triangle. Instead of 3 different reasons and having a list of different reasons why your argument is true, we're going to stick with 1 reason. You're going to write a claim and you're going to say, and this is 1 reason why it is true. And that reason is going to be super focused on who you think your audience is and how it works with your claim. And that's going to provide you with an essay that's far more streamlined. We're also going to talk about the counter argument placement. If the entire purpose of the essay, of an argument essay, is to engage with a counter argument, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put this right at the end of the essay. I see this all the time where people will be like, here's why like marijuana should be legal. It's, it'll clear up jails, it'll generate profit, and it's not addictive. Some people think marijuana should not be legal, but it should be. In conclusion, let me restate my thesis statement, right? We don't want to do that. We want to incorporate the counter argument into the entire thing. We want to make it more central to your paper because it's an engagement with your audience, right? An argument is supposed to be a way of saying, hey, I hear what you're saying, but here's what I say, and my way is better. So no more 3 paragraphs. We're going to try this structure instead, the claim plus the reason. So I want you to practice this. I know this is our very first one we've done for arguments, and we will keep working on this a lot. But I want you to answer this question in a thesis statement. how much of the American dream is dependent on wealth? So we talked a lot about how it might not only be about wealth, right? A lot of you guys were like, no, it's just about like, it's about fulfillment as well. It's about becoming what you want to be. So with that in mind, how much of it is dependent on wealth? You're going to try and write your answer to that as an entity. The American dream is dependent on wealth for this reason, or the American dream is absolutely counter, counter to wealth. I don't know. How would you say it? But you're going to write it as this structure. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 minutes and then we're going to listen to this podcast. You are at home. I'm going to play this podcast now. It's called Revisionist History. That's the name of the podcast. And the episode's called Carlos Doesn't Remember. So I'm going to turn off this recording and you're going to listen to that on your own and you're going to take notes while you listen and then turn in your notes for participation credit. Okay, let me know if you have any questions.